is Europe's first Bitcoin treasury company, and today we have the pleasure to welcoming another large Bitcoin treasury company over in Europe with King here with us today. Welcome here, King. How are you doing?
Good, Alex. Thanks for having me. Great to see you and to be here on the spaces.
Yeah, so King is CEO of Treasury, Bitcoin treasury company from Amsterdam. So we'll be having some level of competition over in the future with King, but collaborative one as we are all accumulating Bitcoin. The objective of this session is to get to know King and have his Bitcoin story and as well his vision of Bitcoin capital markets. The overall objective of Capital B Talks is really to take a step back and understand Bitcoin institutional adoption. King has also capital market experience, so I guess we'll have the pleasure to know what and how you've seen the space evolve over time and tell us the story of Bitcoin treasury companies in your eyes, and as well a few words, I guess, about Bitcoin Amsterdam, or a lot of words as well about Bitcoin Amsterdam as you are organizing it, and we have the pleasure to being invited. So thank you so much. And so yeah, let's dive in, I guess. Would you like to give us an introduction? Tell us about your story and your story about Bitcoin and capital markets?
Sure, for sure. So yeah, I grew up in Amsterdam, studied econometrics, and then started working in London in TradFi. So I started at Goldman Sachs, where I was briefly in equities, and then for most of my time there in the special situation investing group, which really means investing in distressed assets across the capital structure, loans, bonds, etc. And I learned a ton in that group. I then moved to Fortress to do the same, to another fund after that, where I set up their securitization platform, and then run my own fund. And during that period, we're talking about sort of early 2000s until in my hedge fund career to late 2010s, I saw many market cycles. And to me, what was obviously one of the biggest impacts was actually the 2007 sort of hype and then 2008 crash that we saw that led to the global financial crisis. And I was actively investing in credit across the periods, shorting credit, going long credit, etc. And what happened after the global financial crisis, as we all know, is a pretty much unlimited money printing by governments that led to a zero interest rate environment, so-called ZERP, that lasted for many years, and in fact, only until recently was the case. And then I saw firsthand what impact it had on inflation, on asset prices, and on effectively debasement of currencies. Now, during the time when I guess Bitcoin really started and came to grow, I was running my own fund. And I was, especially towards, from the early 2010s pretty much. And I was deep, I was an entrepreneur, I was running a portfolio, so I was deep in the weeds in doing that. And I'd heard some of my friends from Fortress actually talking about Bitcoin. And I thought, okay, that sounds interesting, but I just had no time to really focus on it. I was really, again, when you're an entrepreneur and you're running your portfolio, pretty much also 24/7, you don't have time for much else. And, but it sort of lingered a little bit. And then as I returned capital in my fund in 2017, and again, this is after a long period of very low rates, which is actually kind of difficult for a credit fund, to be fair. I finally had the chance, and I was at I think some sort of drinks. I got to speak to a guy at the bar, and we started talking about Bitcoin, explaining what it was, and that was the first time I sort of spent some time on it, and I was immediately struck, and I invited a guy for lunch the next day, bought my first Bitcoin, et cetera, and that was really the beginning of the journey for me, 2017. And looking back, why it made so much sense is, one, I sort of, in a way, grew up quite quantitatively, so I programmed quite a lot in college. With econometrics, you're always sort of quantifying things, even though my job later was less quantitative. So that immediately struck a chord with me. I think two is what I'd seen again in the markets since the global financial crisis with zero interest rates and debasement of fiat currencies. And three is also where, if you think about the Lehman bankruptcy, everything that happened since, it was always about credit risk, counterparty risk, and sort of this environment where you had to trust other institutions, other intermediaries, but in fact you couldn't very often, right? So to me, in essence, a trustless system that was programmed that was never going to change, with obviously limited supply, fixed supply, was to me was really the answer for a lot of these issues. And to me at the time, it was you'll remember we're talking about a time when a lot of things were still in development. It was still sort of a question: look, how is this going to develop from here on, right? Is this going to be able to get more adoption, more traction? Is it going to be? Are we going to be able to find an environment where it can coexist with the traditional financial system? And we're clearly talking about regulation as a main topic. And then fast forward, where we are now is obviously an amazing development. It's you couldn't have dreamt that we're in a pro sort of Bitcoin regulatory environment, especially in the US. That we're not talking about the treasury companies that are listed. We can talk about it more. So that is to me development from there to here, which to me is I think anything we would have dreamt for. If you look back where we were at the time, right, in the sort of low thousands in terms of price levels, and still very much a lot of skepsis all around. Now the skepsis is still there; it's slowly dissipating, but we're obviously in a very very pro environment right now.
What in the time of your experience in capital market has made you click on Bitcoin treasury companies? When have you started to get interested in, and what was the element? What were the elements that really made it click for you that this is the major opportunity in capital markets right now?
Sure. So my I guess 2 cents on capital markets is right, and again I've I guess been fortunate to trade equities, bonds, CDS, options, everything. There's all these instruments, and there's always innovation. Think about the CLO markets, and whether it sticks still ultimately always depends on investors and on the market, right? You can create the most interesting, beautiful, complex instrument, but if the market doesn't like it, if it doesn't hit it, it's going nowhere. And there's a whole history of those. And then whether an instrument actually latches on, gets traction, is dependent on many factors. It's sometimes it's time to times, alternative assets, everything around it, what's being created. So all those things have to blend in. Now, when I saw MicroStrategy for the first time coming out, I was very interested in obviously the concept of a public company owning Bitcoin. And I was watching it very closely. To me, it was like, okay, this is very interesting, but let's see if it actually works, right? How is it going to be managed? How is the market going to react? How is it going to grow? What are they going to do? And I think we've all been, in that sense, very fortunate to see this development, right? To be able to see how MicroStrategy grew from fairly small, just a software business buying Bitcoin, then adding convertibles, adding some recourse loans, which wasn't great actually, going back to convertibles, and then pref security, etc., and the ATMs, the whole trajectory. And I guess in that sense, like everything in our space, it matured very quickly. It learned very quickly from what was working, and kind of matured. And I would say 24 was really the seminal year for MicroStrategy, with the ATMs really kicking off big time, and then obviously the end of it, the prefs. And what we saw in 24 as well is Metaplanet, trying the same in Japan and being very successful at it. You guys came out late 24 as well, which is fantastic, first in Europe. So that to me was like, okay, well, this is now really becoming an industry, but we're still very early. We're still early in Bitcoin, but we're also still very early in Bitcoin treasury companies. And it really felt to me, again, looking at how I've seen different markets develop, that this is one to stay. This instrument, this type of security, this type of almost like a subsector, has real traction and could only grow bigger, right? And obviously the macro trends are clear to me, right? Increasing adoption, ease, increasing adoption, also for institutional investors, ease, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then looking at, the US is typically in the capital markets, the quickest to innovate, the quickest to go, and obviously the markets are just massive over there. So we saw clearly a very quick evolution in the US on NASDAQ. And in Europe, a gradual progression, and that's where I felt, look, this is actually a big sort of a big market, a big opportunity set, and also a product market fit which is really there to offer Bitcoin exposure through listed share. So to me that all sort of came together earlier part of this year, having seen again the success of the others in the space of 24 and early 25. And then it really becomes a matter of putting the different elements together. How do you go public? How do you raise capital for it? How do you build a team? So I spent a lot of time on that, and it felt to me that I felt I had the right sort of contact base to do those things, and the right sort of ways to getting there. So the last couple of years, I've been very active in the crypto space in general, working mainly on some of the crypto bankruptcies. So I got to know a lot of people in that. So when I really became convinced that there was it was a great time to launch a Dutch Euronext listed Bitcoin treasury company. I went back to Cameron Winkelvoss, to David Bailey, explain what I was doing, and they were very interested. So they are also the sort of anchor investors or cornerstone investors of my anchor round. So we got a bunch of other investors, some great investors with that. So more than 15 total, raised about just shy of $150 million for our first round. And then also at the same time going public through a reverse listing on Euronext Amsterdam, and the thirdly bringing teams together. So to me, because there is a bit of a hurdle still in Europe of adoption, getting institutions and different market participants to adopt one Bitcoin and two Bitcoin treasury companies, I really felt it was super important to build a top quality team, both executive and non-executive, and we do have a two-tier board structure in the Netherlands. So the executive team are all A players from some great companies around us who are also crypto native. And then the supervisory board are also very high quality and also have very good reputations in their respective fields, which makes, again, broader institutional adoption easier. So that's been the journey of launching. So it's been a super exciting journey, and we're still on the early part of it.
Well, congratulations and welcome to the race. I think there will be never enough Bitcoin treasury companies, as Bitcoin is going to become the reserve for the world. It will be strange to not have Bitcoin on the balance sheet at some point. It's quite impressive that we have this name actually of Bitcoin treasury companies. It would be, I think, very interesting if you could share more about your team and how you assembled it, and how are you with the process in the listing, and what are your future plans for Treasury?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, the team, as always, I found that the best way to build a team is really start with people that you know and you know you're gonna really enjoy working with, and obviously are very good at what they do. And we got a great group of people together. From a number of them are actually from Flow Traders. Flow Traders is a Dutch success story, one of the largest market makers of Bitcoin ETFs, listed in the Netherlands, fast-growing company, and actually about half our team are from Flow Traders, and that's our COO, our head of communications, and our CFO. So that's great. General counsel is very important, obviously for our space. Very experienced general counsel who worked for one of the top law firms in the Netherlands, and also at a very large NASDAQ listed company. And then our head of Bitcoin strategy, an important role, as you know yourself, that's the one I'll mention by name, is a gentleman called Taiko Anash. He is a co-founder of Zest Protocol, which is a staking protocol on Stacks, and an early contributor to Stacks. So obviously a great guy, great to have him on board. And that's really core. If you think about the supervisory board, We have people who worked for some of the largest insurance companies in the Netherlands. We have a board member who's on the board of Deribit, obviously the largest option exchange by a mile, who just got acquired by Coinbase, and also a former CFO of actually Flow Trade as well. So very experienced board, very much also. I would say being able to add from different disciplines, all the way from traditional financial markets to more crypto to more called culture, communication, etc. And then the other thing is we have the strategic advisory board, which consists of Cameron Tyler and David Bailey. So that's also great to have, right, to help those guys advise us on a variety of topics that are playing out right now. So that to me is key. And then I would say, other than that, we are working with top counterparties around us. It's very important. We are developing a new space, so a lot of things are innovation. So you need to have really good people, also externally that help with this. So I would say top law firm, accounting firm, capital markets advisors, and then also obviously on the custody side, custodians, etc. So and then the list goes on, but it's obviously important to work with some great people around us as well, to make sure that this we really are institutionally investable, can grow, and everything goes right.
Very, very interesting. And what have you learned through the process, and where are you now with the process with Treasury?
Sure. Yeah. So we obviously announced our fundraise. We announced the reverse listing, the transaction as reverse listing. The EGM of that target was actually today. So that's not a big step, where essentially everything we proposed and was agreed to by the shareholder meeting, which is super exciting. And the next step is the actual listing. So we're going through the process with the exchange for that.
Well, that's quite a process and a lot of work. So
Yes.
congrats. What doesn't get seen is all of the paperwork and all of the legal, administrative things that need to be actually done to have a successful Bitcoin treasury company.
100%. Yeah.
Right?
And I think also because, as mentioned before, because a lot of things are actually new, right? You're covering new grounds. A lot of things haven't been done before, so it requires. It's not sort of your called standard M&A deal or something, right? And that makes it fun too. But it really requires very diligent and creative people as well. So around you, which is awesome.
I'm surprised you didn't mention ChatGPT as one of the key core members. That's
Oh,
quite an important one, right?
yeah, it's always good for a quick take to understand what the landscape looks like for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so indeed, like the team is quite an important and the most important part of the Bitcoin treasury company. And as you mentioned, the parts of the legal aspects and the capital markets aspects are so key that it's very important for a Bitcoin treasury company where like the balance sheet aspect of a company becomes so key and those key people are very important. We'd like to thank them all from Capital B and the treasury side. It's quite some work. And what has been your plans maybe for the future? Have you already announced what you aim to achieve with Treasury?
Yeah, sure. So no, we haven't announced anything except for the
Mm.
actual announcement, and we obviously purchased Bitcoin 1111, which is great. So we are kind of following the I would call it the strategy playbook, right? So once we're listed, be very active capital market participants, both through credit and equity. I would say on the credit issuance side, it will most likely be a combination of convertibles and pref securities. And obviously the equity itself is super important, and the three have to be sort of in the right ratio, right? And that is absolutely critical. So coming from a background in investing in companies that had too much leverage, very important not to have too much leverage and handle that very prudently. make sure the terms are issuer friendly, make sure we can always satisfy our obligations. That's obviously critical, and at the same time having an active equity issuance program. So very important. And then I would say away from that, we can talk about the conference in a moment, but obviously, in general, very important is the marketing side for a business like ours, right? So that happens a lot through the conference, through hosting events, through being out there. We are working actively with our partner as well, BTC Inc. So there's many things that happen on that side as well. Very important. And then I would say the other thing is on Bitcoin itself, we are exploring, different avenues as well to see how we can make our asset productive in some sort of way, and that's an ongoing project. I'm also very curious to hear your thoughts about it, actually. But I think it's clear that as these businesses grow, you got quite a large balance. It is hollow, right? You'll keep it forever. So if you can do certain things with it that creates some sort of income for the business, that is very attractive, and obviously got to be in a very risk-averse way. So that's also a project we're doing. I think over time we'll see this balance where you can have a bit of that productivity on the asset side, being then a good combination with what you're doing on liability side. And then once you find a balance, I think you really can grow. The sky's really the limit. So we're super excited in building that.
I think it would be interesting to get your thoughts after on the overall Bitcoin treasury company space. I think that will be quite useful on that point, and as well your thoughts on Bitcoin Amsterdam and what's coming in very short order. On that point, on the Bitcoin balance sheet, on our side, and with the strategy playbook, the key principle is to not lose the Bitcoin, of course. So we are extremely cautious. We get approached every week with new proposals. We always say no. We keep options on the table, of course, in the future. At the same time, I think it's a question of steps, a question of size. The more Bitcoin treasury company gets to certain sizes, the more it will get approached and look at certain things. Metaplanet has had an approach, the strategy has had one. At Capital B, we've been extremely careful on that aspect. At the same time, there is a market for different Bitcoin treasury companies to approach different strategies. And the time will tell as well what will be the most value generating, because there is this trade-off between having these assets work at the same time that you have also the objective to raise that capital with the credit markets. And one key component, in fact, is to not use the Bitcoin for something else. So I guess there will be different flavors
Yeah.
in the market, and room for different type of investors, and we will evaluate over time, I think. So that's quite interesting, and an industry in the forming, as you mentioned. So in fact, what do you think of the industry as it is right now? You mentioned we started with 3 companies in 2024 with Strategy, Metaplanet, and us at Capital B, and then hundreds of companies, a few of them that are actually very serious players that are coming in with, as you said, like the right organization and doing that with the different steps and taking it seriously. So as you mentioned, you are taking that seriously. What are your analysis of the industry overall, the drawdowns that we've seen over the last 4 months, and your look forward for the industry?
Sure. No, absolutely. That's obviously, I think, a key question on everybody's mind in this space. And I think what started like everything in crypto, it happens super fast, right? Very accelerated timeframes in cycle level, individual level. And this cycle was obviously very very exciting for a quick while, and also came down quite a bit. The cycle, I would say, is quite broad, right? We can talk about the DAT cycle, so not just Bitcoin treasuries, but clearly in the wake of success of the early Bitcoin treasuries, a lot of other tokens came on. And I think what that did cause with very, very, I would say, forgiving capital markets on this is that probably some structures slash teams that really didn't really have a reason to exist did manage to launch a DAT. And two, also some tokens that didn't really have a reason to exist, maybe altogether, but also in that format didn't really. And maybe in some cases it was both, right? And it is that once those get through and it sort of starts happening, then it can start unraveling fairly quickly. And that's what happened. So I would say, to sort of summarize, we saw this early success of the Bitcoin treasury companies. Then more came, other DATs came. It grew very, very quickly. Mults came very sort of crazy, and then we suddenly saw a cycle where all of a sudden there were a lot of big unlocks at the same time. Markets started getting more critical of the reason to exist for some of these. How were the teams going to execute? Why should they trade at a premium, etc. Suddenly everything that was taken for granted in the summer, 6 weeks later was like, why, right? And then you see it really coming off. So that's where we are now. I think it's actually very healthy for this to happen, right? It does, and it's always been my view actually that we would always go to a steady state where you get some of the real survivors and winners, and some that unfortunately don't make it. And that's for any industry is a natural course of evolution. It just happens to happen extremely quickly in the DAT space broadly. And I think this higher level of discipline by the market, again, is very healthy. So what it means is right now for a Bitcoin treasury or even a DAT in general to trade at a premium, you need to really earn that. And obviously we know there's a reflexivity, right? If you trade at a premium, you can actually, you can raise capital, which in itself is accretive. So if you don't, you can't raise capital, right? There's no point trading capital, raising equity if you trade at 1 or even 1.1, and certainly not if you trade below NAV. So that becomes this sort of interplay between where you trade, what the markets believe it should be your valuation, plus that being able to grow, because and it's super. There's a super strong flywheel between the two. Has become much more disciplined right now, and again, I think that's a healthy thing. Now, if we go back to the core question, right? Why should some of these companies trade at a premium? And also, there's also quite some pushback from traditional, some very sort of, I guess, fundamental investors. Why should they trade? Why would you ever buy a Bitcoin at a premium or any token? And then clearly the thesis is always, well, if this company is able to generate Bitcoin per share growth, Bitcoin yields, you are better off investing in this stock than in the underlying asset itself, right? It's outperforming. The goal of ultimately the goal of every DAT, to say it broadly, is to outperform the underlying token, and clearly Bitcoin for Bitcoin treasury companies. And I think with this market environment, it's kind of, in some cases, become kind of questionable whether they can do that. And then you start trading below NAV, and then it becomes sort of, unfortunately, self-fulfilling. So you got to be able to, and then the question is this a sort of, can this company pull itself out of this hole? And I've seen in the traditional markets too, right? If a company, its margins drop, it was always generating 12%, not great, but okay, and it drops to 5%, and at 5%, it's actually cash flow negative. How can it pull itself out of it, right? And then you need really management teams can really execute and do that. Whether it's some sort of buyback program, whether using the capital markets a different way, maybe it's M&A, maybe it's being more active somewhere else. Maybe it's changing the narrative, maybe changing the marketing. You got to play some of the leverage. You have plenty of levers, right? The whole space is very innovative companies, very innovative asset class under it. You have lots of leverage to pull. It's not like you have to just sit there and the market, cry about, the market is not giving me a premium, what can I do? You have plenty of leverage to pull, but you got to do it. And that's what we're seeing now, I think. And I think the market's also learning, right? I think to a certain extent, in the exciting part of the cycle in the summer, we saw a lot of principles we're kind of used to in crypto trading being applied to that trading as is stock trading, right? So, the way the unlocks happen, the very quick motions, the way it happens on crypto Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. All those things that we're very used to from what happens in call it DeFi started being applied to equity trading. And now, and that's in a way that really accelerated some of these share price movements. And on the downside, we're seeing the same. We're seeing obviously, CT can be very critical about projects. It can go very, there's memes. Everything is happening also in the other way around. And I think we just have to go through this. The markets are sort of getting to know each other, a little bit, right? So, and to me, that's in general, including crypto treasury companies, they are equitization of Bitcoin. So they're bringing Bitcoin to equities, right? And the markets are learning from each other. There aren't really that many overlap points, right? Coinbase is obviously crypto business listed, but it's really a fintech company, right? Circle, if you argue, is also so. But this is very raw. The interaction between how crypto markets operate and equity markets, and you see it day in day out. I think the other thing where I think to a certain extent maybe equity investors in these DADs got sort of to understand the market a little bit better is in the way that pipes unlocked, in the way that warrant accounting works, a few other things that are the market's starting to get more smart about it now, I think, as well, and that's probably a good thing, right? A lot of the Let's face it, a lot of metrics in the space are, they're non-accounting metrics. They're created by the space. They become very important, like MNAV. But MNAV does many times mean many different things to different people, and that's sort of, I think we're going through that right now. This long story to say that I'm actually very bullish on the space. I think this will only make the space stronger. There's a clear reason. There's a real product market fit for Bitcoin treasury companies, and therefore the strong will only get stronger and will only get larger, I think, from here on. So that's that to me is definitely where we are. It just happened. Normally it happens maybe 2 or 3 years for this cycle to start happening. Like even look at the .com cycle, right? The earlier one, it was from 99 to 2001, and here we've done it in 6 months. So we're going very quick. But that's also the lesson. The winners will become very, very big winners over time.
Well, in many ways, the months are years in Bitcoin treasury companies. That's for sure. In your discussions with investors over in Europe, what have you noticed over the last weeks and months? Is there any evolution? Are there any topics or things that click more for investors that you meet, or any new type of evolution that you've seen in the market?
Yeah, I would say obviously, if you compare Europe to the US, Europe, there's in general a bit more caution with the space. There's in general a bit more caution with the underlying asset class and then with the space. I think sometimes in Europe, investors feel that sort of missed the boat kind of thing, right? Because there was this big cycle over the summer and it's come down a bit. I would say in general that's a bit of a caution, but to me it's I've also for my hedge funds, so for better or worse, I've been raising capital for many years, and when you get feedback from an investor, you always have to read between the lines somewhere, right? So there could be some another reason why they like it or they don't like it actually. So that's the first thing. I would say in general they're opening up, seeing how strategy has really opened up the credit markets in the U.S. Instrument by instrument. I think that certainly seems to be something. As we all know, fixed income investors are yield hungry everywhere in the world, but more so here and in Asia. Or in Japan for sure than in the US, with the rates even lower here. So you offer attractive yield product. People are definitely interested in exploring that. So I think those are a few things that are happening. I think in general, there's probably still a little bit of it also interlinked, right? We are Bitcoin treasury companies, but we do benefit with the broader ecosystem getting more adoption, right? And if you think about, in my simple view, what are the two big use cases in crypto? One is Bitcoin as a store of value, And two is actually stablecoins as a means of transacting, right? So the other big theme is obviously stablecoins that are happening a lot, and that's a very big and positive theme in the U.S. And I think that's one where, unfortunately, European regulators are taking a more cautious stance on right now, and whether it's by because it's still a lack of understanding or other things. To me, it's inevitable. This is going to be even only getting bigger and bigger, right? So I think that's another thing that sort of impacts, I think, in a way, also bigger treasury companies. It slows it down a little bit. So once you see that happening, opening up a little bit more, I think we'll see more as well. So a bit cautious, I would say, is my take on European investors. I'm very curious on your view because obviously you're been running a public company for probably about a year now. Actually, congratulations. So yeah.
It's been evolving quite a lot. At the very beginning, we've had a lot of participation in the market of institutions that looked at those new equities and part of institutions that I think were part of the not the biggest ones, but the most actively trading ones.
Yeah.
And we have, of course, benefited a lot from that as we were the first mover, and we had this capacity actually to create at the time the first Bitcoin denominated bonds. And I think that those institutional investors in Europe, that were early in the game, they largely benefited from that situation. And then I think that over when there was the May, June, we had some bigger institutions that started to allocate. We had, for example, Generali that started to have a position with us with a private placement, not only in the market. We had a lot of discussions, and but some of them were a bit cautious in terms of the MNAV levels. And during the summer, everyone was a bit looking at each other, and we are starting now to get a lot more discussions as well with the levels that have been going on, but a lot of consolidation, and as you said, a lot of healthy consolidation movement that we are starting to see now. And with this, it seems like now bigger names are now taking this topic more seriously. We are getting contacted for research and for more analysis on the topic. So I will be spending more time on that matter as well. And I think that over time, those institutions, they will position back into the space and add to their existing positions as we go. But as you said, it takes time, it takes education, and that's where the conferences are important. So
Yeah.
I guess it would be good to know more about Bitcoin Amsterdam and your plans there, what will be discussed. I know there will be the Bitcoin for Corporations Day as well, so it would be great for you to give us
Sure.
a view on that.
Yeah, yeah, no, we're very excited to acquire the Bitcoin Amsterdam conference. It was already a great conference, right? One of the largest outside of the US. And it's our goal to make it even better and bring top speakers together, bring the ecosystem together, and also broaden it for education. So we're super excited. By the way, for the record, it's the 13th and the 14th of November. So it's called 3 weeks away actually, pretty soon. And basically starting with a great lineup of speakers. So Cameron Tyler, Winkles are coming. Jack Maas is coming like last year. Tiff Dean is coming. Tons of great speakers. We have it, as you said, over called 2.5 days, 2.5, 3 days, with also Bitcoin for Corporations hosting a great day. There's clearly tons of great side events, and I think you'll find that it is. We'll have the quality of the panels is phenomenal. I think, by the way, the website is bitcoin.amsterdam, and so you'll see on every topic, for instance, on DATs, on mining, the list goes on. Very high quality speakers. We just announced today that the finance minister of Luxembourg is going to be speaking as well, keynote, because obviously Luxembourg is the first European country to announce a strategic Bitcoin reserves, which is fantastic, European leader in the space. So there'll be lots of great announcements and top speakers, and obviously great to have you as well on the panels. So look forward to it.
That's great. And is there any additional events that you are planning? The conference should already be quite some work. Will there be other conferences over the year, or the
Sure. Yeah,
focus will
we're
be?
now. Yeah, all eyes are on Bitcoin Amsterdam, but we're certainly working on that. Right. We'll also be doing Bitcoin Magazine for the Netherlands. I mean, the base of the conference is very strong. The sponsors we have, the sort of the organization around it. So it's kind of thing where we're thinking of doing other things around it. You're absolutely right. And it could be a content seminar. It doesn't have to be a massive one with 5,000 people every time, but there's many different ways to do that. I think to me, this is also for me the raison d'être, right, for Bitcoin Treasury Company is build the ecosystem together. So for us, the Dutch ecosystem is great. There's obviously lots of crypto traders, great market makers, entrepreneurs, founders, etc. And to continue to do something with that, right? It definitely shouldn't be once a year. This one will be great to bring everybody together, but it should also kick off a new period of ecosystem growth in Europe, hopefully. So that's certainly part of it.
I think one of the questions we usually get, so I think that would be quite interesting on your side as well, would be to know more about the specificities of the Netherlands market. I think many what's special about the Netherlands, the habits of investors over there, and the level of Bitcoin adoption.
Sure. So by history, Netherlands has always been a trader's sort of culture, right? So instantly, that's why I felt it was also some symbolic reason to have a Bitcoin treasury company here, because the Netherlands had the first joint stock company, right, where people could buy into it, and then the first stock exchange where these shares were listed. So they were talking about the early part of the 17th century, and that led into the sort of golden age. So this whole financial innovation where suddenly people could own a company together that didn't know each other and be able to trade it. That was the start of the financial markets as we know it. And to me, what we're doing with Bitcoin, what's happening with Bitcoin and hyper Bitcoinization, is the start of a new era, right? So for that, it had to be here as well in the Netherlands. So this culture of trading is very much ingrained. So we have, our adoption levels, I think, are somewhat above average, certainly for the European markets. Trading activities is very good. I think there's a very good, because the stock market has always been a core part of the financial ecosystem here. There's very high quality traders here, right? So a lot of the big market makers globally are from Amsterdam. I'm talking about Flow Traders, Optiver, IMC, and a lot of the spin-offs from that actually end up going to crypto. Those are to a certain extent traditional assets, but a lot of them went into crypto. So there are a lot of crypto market makers in Amsterdam internationally, and that led to a whole ecosystem of entrepreneurs, infrastructure providers around it. Galaxy will be opening an office here in Amsterdam. They chose Amsterdam as their European sort of base. So that's all I think very exciting, and that's what we're all bringing together again in the Amsterdam conference. So yeah, and then I would say very what does it sort of, if you think about a Bitcoin mindset, right? It's obviously a very independent entrepreneurial mindset, where the core principles of Bitcoin are what's close to your heart, as in don't need to trust any central entity that controls it, immutable. That I think all those things really fit with the culture here as well. And then I guess on the base of it, also the exchanges is one of the top exchanges.
What do you think will be the future of Bitcoin treasury companies 5 to 10 years down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I generally believe, again, I always like to say this, but when I was in in distressed assets and you see some company getting into trouble and the bonds drop and you can essentially buy it cheap, the question is always, does this company have a reason to exist, right? Because a bond could be trading at 100 cents and then trading at 40 cents. They could still be way too expensive if it goes to 10 or 0, right? To state the obvious. And very often a company that is in that sort of decline can decline further. So to me, it's always been like, well, is there core reasons for this business model to exist? And I have extreme high conviction that the business model of Bitcoin treasury companies is very powerful and their stay is only going to grow. So, and that to me is not even independent of the Bitcoin price, right? We're all very bullish on Bitcoin over time, and it's fantastic if it goes to who knows where. But that to me is not even the main reason. These companies should be able to grow independently, and if Bitcoin is also on a tear on top of that, that's only going to give the exponential growth, which hopefully will happen. So as these companies grow their balance sheet, their importance in the ecosystem, I'm 100% convinced that this growth and this expansion will really go into the traditional financial ecosystem, and these companies will become core parts of it. And again, how that is going to play out, I don't think we know yet, right? How you can be able to use your Bitcoin as part of that, strengthen the ecosystem that way, different ways. But if you have a multi-billion euro company that's one of the largest in space, is in the major indices, it's very clear it's going to have a very important role to play. And I'm 100% convinced about that. And I think this will happen all over the world, right? And if we're to a certain extent, we're always in a way a bit fortunate here that we can see how strategy evolves, because obviously this 800-pound gorilla, they're light years ahead in terms of their size and what they've done, and they're creating new markets for us, which I think we're all very grateful for. And we'll see how this develops, and maybe we'll be first on this level, right? How these companies can become core part of the ecosystem. So, but that to me is 100% part, and I think it will only make Bitcoin stronger. It will increase adoption. It will having institutional investors having an effect, pension plans have exposure through Bitcoin, whether it's through credit instruments or equity instruments. It's just very much a very good thing for not just for Bitcoin but also for society. So I'm all for that vision into the future.
Great. We are becoming close to the end. What would be your message to a newcomer to a Bitcoin treasury company that would be afraid of the volatility?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question, actually. I think what is key is the long-term vision, right? And I think if there's one thing I've certainly seen is that trying to time the market, trying to, I guess, day trade, all of that is usually, for most people, a money-losing strategy. So if you have conviction on the model, if you follow the same vision, if you want to have an easy instrument, then a Bitcoin treasury company is a great vehicle. And you should certainly count on volatility and therefore have a long-term vision in that, right? And where that means that you want to be start kind of DCAing, always buying a little bit, or you buy it in batches, or you buy it and you don't look at it. That's clearly personal preferences. But longer term, with a combination of Bitcoin and Bitcoin's increasing value, and a Bitcoin treasury company doing a good job, it will hopefully count for a very, very good investment and a good investment decision. And I think for people who are kind of into the space, it's actually a very easy way to get into it. Yeah.
Indeed. So as a final question, we always ask, what would be your message to Capital B and Treasury shareholders? Maybe to end with your view on the market right now and what you expect for the future.
Sure. Look, the market's a market, right? And the market, I've learned to really respect the discipline of the market. The market is generally right. So, as a shareholder in tougher times, very important to stick to this conviction. And also, frankly, if a good friend of mine once said, in the end of the day, you rent a stock, you don't own it, right? If you really feel low conviction on that point in time, frankly, you can trade out, you can back in, right? You can do that, you can still part of it. I think it's very important for people to feel very free what they're doing, and that's what creates the market, right? And I think longer term, these companies are going to be very, very important players. So if you join that vision, then very much you should hopefully be part of it. Maybe you want to be part of a couple of these companies, have slightly different execution, etc., and that will hopefully be for good investment. I would say away from that, I'm sure as you do, and as for myself, we'll always appreciate feedback from investors. It's important to stay constructive, stay hopefully reasonable, and we'll always be responsive and open and take feedback with us, right? We're going through cycles together, and if we go through that and we learn from each other, then we can only get stronger. So very much hope people to come along the journey, and I think even as both players in the ecosystem will make the ecosystem stronger. So
Let's get stronger all together. I think that's a wise word to end. And thank you so much, King, for coming on in this episode with us. And we'll be seeing you in Amsterdam. I'm sure that will be a great conference. So thank you so much.
great, thanks Alex for hosting, appreciate it, and see you
Thank
soon.
you.